All right, let's start with respect to solutions and colligative properties. First, we'll talk about solutions. What are the different types of solutions? What are their particle size? And then we will go to the different ways to express concentrations. And after that, we will see the colligative properties. First of all, when we talk about solutions, we all know it's a homogeneous mixture of two or more substances, which can be mixed within the certain limits over there. Now the particle size, normally we say in a solution means solute plus solvent. The molecular size is somewhere around 10 raised to minus 9 meters. That's in terms of diameters. That is the size what we have, and hence cannot be separated by either filtration or centrifugation. Filtration is basically keeping a filter paper and try to filter it out. That's filtration process. Centrifuging is basically in the laboratories. You have the centrifuge machines, where in the centrifuge tubes, you put your solution, and then those solutions are made to whirl around over there. And because of the gravity part, the entire, what I can call as the filter, whatever is the residue, that will settle at the bottom and the filtrate will lie on the top. Solute and solvent. Normally we know solute, the one which is small in amount as compared to the solvent. So the smaller amount is the solute and the larger part is the solvent. Aqueous and non-aqueous solutions. Aqueous means in presence of water. Non-aqueous, it can be any other solvent other than water, can be in benzene, can be in acetic acid, that way. Then importance of solutions. Now we will talk about the concentrations what we have. 1 ppm, that's parts per million. Is this clear? That when it is added to a toothpaste, it causes tooth decay of the enamel over there. 1.5 ppm, matlab more than 1 ppm of fluoride ions, if it is present, then that causes mottling of teeth. Mottle means yellow spots. It's basically people developing yellow spots on the teeth over there. And if it is still in higher concentration, then that can act as a rat poison also. So depending on the concentration you add, so around 1 ppm, that will prevent the tooth decay. 1.5 ppm, that causes mottling, that is yellow spots on the teeth over there. And third is basically higher concentration can be also a rat kill over there. Solutions of intravenous injection should have the same ionic concentrations as that of blood plasma. This is the concept what we'll be doing, that is isotonic solutions. Isotonic solutions across the semi-permeable membrane. The two solutions will have equal concentrations. So first the classifications over there with respect to the solute solvent part, we have total 9 types of solutions. Solid and solid types, mainly alloys. Is this clear? All of them, that is brass, silver, German silver, bronze, and all of them. That's solid and solid, two solids combined together. Then liquid and solid, where liquid is the solute and solid is the solvent. That's basically the hydrated salts, amalgams of mercury with sodium. Because, so when I say sodium amalgam, what we have done in the, if anybody remembers, reduction of aldehydes and ketones. Aldehydes on reduction gives primary alcohol, ketones on reduction gives secondary alcohol. So for that part, it is liquid mercury, which is the solute dissolved in a solid solvent, that is sodium over there, that way. So liquid and solid amalgams. That's an important one. Gas and solid is basically nothing but any dissolved gases over there, what we have. All right. Gases, we know, which are dissolved on the surface over there. Like say we have done hydrogenation. Is this clear? Gas on solid. So you had, for example, in hydrogenation, when we said hydrogen is on the, or for example, same thing, aldehydes on reduction gives primary alcohol in the presence of ranitidine. So on the surface of ranitidine, that is an alloy of nickel and aluminium, we have hydrogen gas. So gas on solid. Then comes liquid in liquid solutions. That is basically solid and liquid types. That is all sugar solution, salt solution, sugar and water, salt and water. Liquid in liquid. That's basically alcohol and water that we all know that forms hydrogen bonding. And then gas in liquid. Gas in liquid is basically carbon dioxide bubbled in water. That is the aerated drink, or oxygen dissolved in water in a small concentration of ppms. Then with respect to gases, solid in gas. So that's basically iodine, the ones that sublimes. So iodine vapors in air, camphor in air, or ammonium chloride in air, because all these compounds, they will sublime. Liquid in gas. Liquid is basically water vapor in air, what we have. All right. And gas in gas. Gas in gas is basically nothing but the homogeneous mixtures, what we have. That is one. Then talking about the solutions, we will say solutions of solids in solids. So solids in solids are basically what we call them as substitutional solid solution. Catch the word. Their sizes are almost the same. One substitutes for the other. And remember, in alloys, when the two metal mixes, oxidation state of any of the metal is zero. Like for example, suppose I'm talking here about, say, brass. Brass is basically, we have the brass vessels and all we have. So brass is basically copper and zinc. All right. Or we have over there bronze, statues are made, that is copper, zinc and tin. So here the metal sizes are almost the same. So if the metals have similar size, what will happen? One size will substitute the other. Like look at that. Solute size is also, solute is this, and that's the solvent. So few of the solute have been replaced by solvent. Then that type of a solution is called substitutional solution. So the sizes are almost the same. Okay. Same way, more alloys are given over there, like brass, bronze, monel metal, steel, and so on. Second we have is interstitial solution. The diagram is very, very self-explanatory there. When I say interstitial, occupying the in-between spaces. So in all possible, these metals, we are having a definite arrangement of their lattice particles. That is the atoms, ions, or the molecules. So depending on the packing, look at this. This part, what you see, the empty spaces, is what we call as the voids. Now in these empty spaces, you can have the other metal coming and occupying the space. Like for example, look at that. This is the solute that is occupying the in-between position. That is called the interstitial position. Best example to talk, the steel utensils, what we have at home. Okay, that's mainly is iron, and in iron they contain carbon, because carbon size is small, so carbon will go and seep in the in-between spaces over there. So that is an interstitial solution there. That is one. Atoms who belongs to one enter the voids, all right, of the host lattice. Lattice is basically the array in which you arrange the atoms, molecules, or ions in the three-dimensional arrangement. Like tungsten carbide, that is called WC. It is one of the knives used for a knife which is used for cutting metals. All right, that's tungsten carbide over there, a very hard material. Now, different ways to express concentrations. First way to express concentrations over there is basically percentage, with respect to 100. That is either W by W, V by V, or sometimes we also have it as W by V also. Now percentage means over there mass of solute present in 100 grams of solution. Percentage by volume, mass of solute in 100 ml of solution. And liquid dissolving in other liquid, that is V by V. That is mass of solute dissolved in 100 ml of solution. Now, whenever this word comes, ml of solution or 100 grams of solution, keep in mind, solution means solute plus solvent together. That's the solution. Okay. Strength can be measured over there with respect to 1 liter solution. So strength is nothing but what we say amount of solute which is present in a given volume will tell me the strength, which is expressed in terms of molarity, molality, normality, that way. Okay. We'll talk about each one now. First one, molarity, moles per liter. Now, when I talk about moles, number of moles, see, we say concentration C is equal to N by V. And N is nothing but the given mass upon the molar mass. All right, that's the part. So that's molarity, moles present per liter of a solution. The word formality, everyone, is mainly only for ionic compounds. Because ionic compounds, we have learned, they don't exist as molar masses. They sometimes exist as dimers or trimers. So if they exist as dimers or trimers, then we have to talk in terms of the formality part. That is the formula weight. Formality corresponds to formula weight. Like for example, aluminum chloride, if I have to tell you, aluminum chloride exists as a dimer. So the formula is not of AlCl3, it is the formula weight is Al2Cl6. That's what we take. Okay. So the formula mass, NaCl exists as NaCl only. So for NaCl, the formula mass and the molar mass are the same. So molarity, moles present per liter. Formality, formula weight dissolved in 1 liter of solution is called as formal solution. Molarity is M, moles per liter or moles per dm3. 1 liter is 1 dm3. Then comes normality. Normality is nothing but the number of gram equivalents of the solute present in 1 liter of a solution. What is gram equivalent? 1 gram equivalent is its equivalent mass. I've discussed with you all, equivalent mass is nothing but an relative mass. Mass which relates to different things in different forms. Like for example, if I'm talking about, if you remember, I recall this, if I'm having 100 rupees, 100 rupees will correspond to nothing but I'll be getting 2 dozen bananas over there, or maybe 100 rupees will correspond to just 1 watermelon. Or if I say apples, might be just 2 or 3 apples over there. That's it. So that 100 rupees relevance with respect to bananas is 2 dozen. With respect to watermelon, it's only 1. But if I have to give a definition wise now, equivalent mass is different for different things. So equivalent mass or equivalent weight is that weight which displaces 1.008 parts by weight of hydrogen, or 8 parts by weight of oxygen, or 35.5 parts by weight of chlorine. That's the equivalent weight. So we have 4 different types of equivalent weights to talk. Quickly to talk, equivalent weight of an acid or a base is the molar mass divided by basicity or acidity. What is basicity? Number of replaceable H plus ions. And what's acidity? That's the number of replaceable OH ions. Okay, so we can talk about the equivalent weights of the acids or the bases. That is one. Second, we have equivalent weight of a salt. Now salt, the molar mass upon total positive valency of metal atoms. In other words, the total positive charge on the cation or the total negative charge on the anion. Like for example, equivalent weight, if I have to talk for sodium carbonate, Na2CO3. Carbonate, the net charge is -2. Sodium, the net charge is +2. So the molar mass, equivalent mass will be the molar mass divided by 2. So molar mass of Na2CO3 divided by 2, that will be the equivalent mass of the salt. Third and fourth are not given here. Important, equivalent mass, what we have of an element in a compound. There are many elements which show variable oxidation state, like Fe, ferrous ferric. So its equivalent mass will be different for different things. Like for example, in FeSO4, its sulfate is -2, Fe is +2. So the equivalent mass will be molar mass divided by 2. Ferric chloride, FeCl3. Whatever is the atomic mass of Fe, is this clear? Divided by 3. So Fe ka mass is 56 divided by 3. That's the equivalent mass of Fe in FeCl3. And in FeSO4, ferrous sulfate, atomic mass of Fe, that's 56 divided by 2. Because in FeSO4, Fe is in +2 oxidation state. So it will change from compound to compound. That's the third one. And fourth, equivalent mass of an oxidizing or a reducing agent. That's the molar mass upon the number of electrons lost if it is a reducing agent, or the number of electrons gained if it is an oxidizing agent. So normality, just for the definition part, number of gram equivalents present per liter of a solution is called normality. Or if I have to put up the formula, it will be the given weight divided by its equivalent weight into the volume of the solution in liters. Okay, that's normality. Then comes the next feature, molality. Now normality, molarity, both are temperature dependent. Matlab, very important. When I talk about which is a better way to express concentration, then it's not normality, molarity, but it is molality. Why like that? Now, normality and now, if you see the definition right now of normality and molarity, molarity was moles per liter, normality was gram equivalents per liter. So anything that depends upon volume, as per Charles' law, we know volume is directly proportional to temperature at a constant pressure. So if I prepare a 1 molar or a 1 normal solution, all right, and keep it for a week, atmospheric pressure is remaining constant, but in the entire day, there will be temperature changes. So due to temperature changes, the volume of the solution, the liquid may expand or it may contract. So due to expansion or contraction, what will happen over there? The concentration will change. Whereas if I talk about molality, that's a one which is temperature independent. How do we put it up? Number of moles of a solute dissolved in 1000 grams or 1 kg of pure solvent. That's what we have as molality. So number of moles of solute upon mass of solvent in kg. Okay. So number of moles of solute, same way. So this can be also written as the given weight of solute upon its molecular weight into mass of solvent, that's in kilogram. If the mass is taken in grams, the numerator will be multiplied by 1000. Okay. Same way for molarity, normality. If the volume is taken in ml or centimeter cube, the numerators are multiplied with 1000. Then comes the next feature, what we call as mole fraction. Mole fraction is basically, now when I talk about a binary solution, one solute, one solvent. So if I say mole fraction of solvent will be number of moles of solvent upon number of moles of solute plus number of moles of solvent. That's what it says. So solute is X2. So moles of solute upon solute plus solvent. Or mole fraction of solvent will be, there's a correction here. It should be N1. N1 upon N1 plus N2. And remember, let it be a binary or let it be over there, nothing but a ternary solution. We will say sum of all mole fraction is always unity. Okay, that is one. Then comes mass fraction. Mass fraction is basically what we call as W by W. So mass fraction of A, that is the weight of A upon the weight of solute plus solvent. And same way mass fraction of B. So mass fraction also normally we say it's like mole fraction only. Rather than moles ka fraction, we will take the mass ka fraction. And the mass fraction, when I take it in percentage, then that becomes W by W. That way. That's mass percent. Then comes ppm. ppm is nothing but the amount of solute present in million parts of solution. Amount of solute present in million parts of solution. So mass of solution, mass of A upon the mass of solution into 10 raised to 6, because million will be 10 raised to 6. That. Okay. Now when I say mass of solution, it is solute plus solvent, that way. So here it is mass of A, which is its solute. Then now these are basically informations over here. Observe this. Molality, mole fraction, mass fraction are preferred over normality and molarity. Answer is simple. Molality, mole fraction, mass fraction, they are independent of volume, whereas molarity and normality depend on volume. So they do not change with temperature. Is this clear? So that's the reason why better way to express concentration is molality, mole fraction, and mass fraction. Normality is the number of milliequivalents of the solute. Molarity is the number of millimoles dissolved. Thus, the V volume of the solution of normality contains V into X milliequivalents, and volume in cubic centimeter solution of molarity contains Y into Y molarity contains Y into V millimoles of solute. So for molarity, we can calculate its millimoles. For normality, we can calculate its milli equivalents. Okay, that's one. Then we also have something called as ionic strength. What exactly is ionic strength? It is the strength I of the solution, which is a measure of the electrical intensity due to the presence of ions in the solution. All right. So depending on the ions which conduct electricity, it is equal to half of the sum of the terms obtained by multiplying the molality of each ion and the square of its valency. So if you want to know the ionic strength, it is nothing but it's the measure of the electrical intensity, how many ions are present. So it's half M1 square, Z1 square, like that. So basically half summation M1, Z1 the whole square, where M1 is the molality and Z1 square is basically nothing but the square of its valency, whatever of the ions are present there. Where M1, M2, N3 are the molalities, Z1, Z2, N3 are the corresponding valencies present. Well, look at that. 0.1 molal NaCl. So molality is 0.1, valency is 1 over there, that way. Barium ions, molality is 0.2 molal barium chloride, so 0.2, and barium ka charge is +2. So total molality of barium chloride when I do will be how much over there? Chloride ions, total molality of chloride will be over there nothing but 0.1 plus 0.4. Is that clear? So that's going to be 0.5 over there, that way. Okay. Valency of chloride is 1. So the intensity when we calculate, so first part over there, sodium ions. So that's 0.1 into 1. That is one part over there. Plus 0.2 into 2, because barium ions is 2. So they're talking about, this is basically about barium chloride and plus 0.5 into 1 the whole square. That's the total part, molality of chloride. So we will get its intensity as 0.7. So this is just an extra formula. All right. That is half summation of M1 into Z1 into the whole square. Okay. That's one part. That's the ionic strength. Now some relationships. This is for the shortcut part between molality and mole fraction, where X2 is M into M1 upon 1 plus M1, where M1, 1 corresponds to always solvent over there. That is the molar mass of the solvent over there. All right. And small m is its molality. So molality, so X2 is molality into the molar mass of the solvent upon 1 plus M into M1. That is one part. They have given the proof part. The proof is just for understanding. That's fair. Second one, relationship with respect to molality and molarity. Please jot down these formulas because these formulas are important. Okay. Relationship between molality and molarity of the solution, where we can say molality is equal to M D minus M into M2, where once again, capital M is molarity. Keep in mind. Okay. Capital M is molarity. Small m, that's molality. D is the density of the solution in kg per liter. Okay. Or it can be over there in terms of grams per centimeter cube also. It's the same thing. And M2 is the molar mass of the solute, because 2 is for the solute, 1 is for the solvent. So M2, the molar mass of solute. Same way, relationship between mole fraction of the solute, that is X2, and molarity, capital M. Mole fraction X2 and molarity M. So X2 is M into M1. Again, M1 is for molar mass of solvent, M2 molar mass of solute. So X2 is M into M1 upon M, that is the molar mass, into M1 minus M2 plus density. So M2 mass of solute, M1 mass of solvent, and D is its density. Then comes important one, relationship with respect to molality and solubility. What it says, solubility we all know, that is nothing but the amount of solute which can be dissolved over there in a given volume of a solvent. So solubility of a solute means grams of solute dissolved in 100 grams of solvent to make a saturated solution. We know na saturated solution is what? Maximum solute that can be dissolved in a given volume of a solvent. Solubility S means grams of solute in 100 grams of solvent. So solubility, that is S grams of solute, will be S upon M2 moles where M2 is the molar mass of solute. So moles of solute in 1000 grams, this was in 100, will be nothing but 10s by M2. In other words, molality is equal to 10s by M2. This is with respect to over there nothing but 1000 grams of solvent. So molality will be 10 into S, that is the solubility over there. All right, that is amount of grams present in 100 grams of solvent, and M2 the molar mass of the solute. Then calculation of normality, molarity with respect to mixtures. So if you're mixing two acids, or if you're mixing two bases, then simple, with respect to normality, the dilution law, N1V1 plus N2V2 is equal to N3 into the net volumes V1 plus V2, and same applies for molarities. M1V1 plus M2V2 is equal to M3 with the volumes V1 plus V2. Okay, or you can write this as capital M3, or you can say, for example, M3 is equal to M1V1 plus M2V2 upon V1 plus V2. And same way for normality, N3 is equal to N1V1 plus N2V2 upon V1 plus V2. Then normality, molarity with respect to titrations. This is important. This in case if they ask you from the MCQs point. Dilution law, though we know. For molarity, first balance the reaction where N1 and N2 are the coefficients. Whatever are the balanced. Is this clear? So whatever we take now, the coefficients, the stoichiometric coefficients, the number of moles that we balance, those are the N1 and N2 that you put it to apply to the molarity equation whenever there is titrations, mixing up of an acid or a base. So it's basically M1 V1 upon N1, where N1 is the stoichiometric coefficient. Suppose this is the acid part and that's the base part. Okay. So if I'm mixing an acid with a base, is this clear? That depending on the moles that we balance over there. All right. So N1 and N2 are its stoichiometric coefficients. Then now comparison between 1 molar and 1 molal solution. This I have discussed. Once again to tell you, molar solutions are always more concentrated than molal solutions. Why capital M solutions are more concentrated? Quick example. Prepare 1 capital M HCl solution. HCl molar mass is 36.5 grams. So 36.5 grams are dissolved in 1 liter of a solution. Now when I say 1 liter of a solution is solute plus solvent. So 36.5 grams will occupy certain volume and remaining is the solvent. So suppose I say aqueous solution, 1 molar HCl solution, aqueous. So 36.5 grams of HCl and water, so that the total volume of the solute plus solvent is 1 liter. So simple question, is the solvent added exactly 1 liter? No, the solvent is less than 1 liter. So if the solvent is less than 1 liter, that's capital M. Now come to small m. What is molality definition? 1 mole of a solute dissolved in 1 kg of pure solvent. So there, if I prepare 1 m solution of HCl, you are dissolving 36.5 grams exactly in 1 kg or 1000 grams of pure solvent. So pure solvent is 1000 grams. Now water density is 1. So water density is 1, 1000 grams is nothing but 1000 ml. All right. So there the solvent added is exactly 1000. Whereas with respect to capital M, the solvent was less than 1 liter because solute occupied certain volume. Hence we say capital M solutions are always more concentrated. Hence 1 molar solution is more concentrated than 1 M. However, in case of non-aqueous solution, molarity can be greater than molality or molarity can be less depending on the density. Normally its density of water is 1. That's why we say 1 molar solution is more concentrated than 1 molar. But for non-aqueous, it will not be that way. It will depend on its density. Okay. Then comes solubility. Now solubility, that's the maximum amount of solute that can be dissolved in a given volume of a solvent at a given temperature. That's what we call as solubility. So solubility of solids in liquids. Now, normal principle of solubility is all like dissolves like. So salts, which are ionic compounds, will be soluble in polar solvents like water. Organic compounds will be more soluble in non-polar solvents like benzene, chloroform, acetic acid, etc. So look at that. NaCl, all salts dissolve in polar solvents, whereas non-ionic solids, iodine, naphthalene, dissolve in non-polar solvents. Non-ionic compounds dissolve in water due to H bonding. So we have certain compounds which are non-ionic, like sugars. Sugars don't have any charges, glucose, sucrose, fructose, but they are soluble in water due to H bonding. That's hydrogen bonding. Then the three solutions, we know this: saturated, unsaturated, supersaturated solution. We have done an ionic, right? Principle of solubility. Saturated solution. First, what is a saturated solution? Maximum solute is present in a given volume of a solvent at a given temperature. Unsaturated, less amount of solute is present in a given volume of a solvent at a given temperature. And supersaturated contains more amount of solute dissolved in a given volume of a solvent at a given temperature. So supersaturated solution, when you cool them, the excess what you have dissolved will precipitate out. And that was the condition with respect to solubility. If anybody remembers, what was that part over there? Principle of solubility. If ionic product of the ions is lesser than the theoretical solubility product, that is lesser than solubility product Ksp, then the solution is unsaturated, precipitation will not occur. If the ionic product of the ions of the solution is equal to its solubility product, then we say the solution is saturated. Again, precipitation will not occur. Third condition, only when the product of the ions, that is the ionic product, is greater than the solubility product, then we say, yes, solution is supersaturated. Now precipitation occurs. All right, so that's the part over there, the three solutions. Then solubility of solids in liquids. Now, the solubility of a solid in a liquid at any temperature is defined as the maximum amount of solute, that is a solid, dissolved in 100 grams of a solvent to form a saturated solution at that temperature. Then solubility in terms of lattice energy and hydration energy. We all know lattice energy, the attraction between the cation and anion, that is the lattice energy. Hydration energy is when the same ionic compound is dissolved in water. Then hydration energy is the lattice energy breaks and the ions of the solute are surrounded by the opposite ions of water. And that's called hydration energy. So that expression we have, what it says, solubility can be expressed as lattice and hydration. Lattice energy is the energy required to dissociate 1 mole of ionic crystal into its ions. So energy supplied to break the force of attraction between the cations and anions in an ionic solute. And hydration is the energy released when 1 mole of ions undergo hydration. What is hydration? Solute particles surrounded by the opposite ions of water. So if I dissolve NaCl in water, the force of attraction holding the Na plus and chloride ions is the lattice energy. Okay, so lattice energy is either the energy released when an ionic compound is formed, or is the energy supplied to break the force of attraction between the Na plus and chloride ions. Now this NaCl, when I dissolve in water, what happens? The ionic bond breaks. Na plus ions are surrounded by the OH ions of water, and the chloride ions of NaCl are surrounded by the H plus ions of water. That term is called hydration enthalpy. That's the energy released when you dissolve any solid like sodium hydroxide flakes. When you dissolve in water, it readily dissolves, the solution becomes hot. It's an exothermic reaction, energy is released. So if hydration enthalpy is greater, if I have to compare, one second. Okay. 1 minute. So it says if hydration enthalpy is greater than lattice energy, then the solid will dissolve. Yes, because it has more affinity for the opposite ions of the solvent that way. Then the next component over there, what we have, effect of temperature on solubility. Now this dissociation can either be exothermic or it can be endothermic. And that depends upon the Le-Chatelier's principle. I hope everybody remembers Le-Chatelier's principle. What was Le-Chatelier's principle? When any new stress is added at equilibrium. What is stress? Addition or subtraction of the solute, or increase or decrease of pressure, increase or decrease of temperature, increase or decrease of volume. All right. So we say any new stress is added at equilibrium, then that stress is nullified. And to nullify the stress, the equilibrium may shift either towards the right or it may shift towards the left. That was Le-Chatelier's principle. Now, all this depends upon the three interactions. Effect of temperature on solubility will depend either upon one, the solute-solute interaction, solvent-solvent interaction, and third, solute-solvent interaction. So depending on the interactions, we will have the solubility part. Sodium nitrate, potassium nitrate, NaCl, KCl dissolve with absorption of heat. That is, their dissolution is endothermic, meaning the solubility increases with increase in temperature. But salts like lithium carbonate, sodium carbonate, cerium sulfate, they dissolve by evolution of heat. That is, their dissolution is exothermic. So solubility decreases with the increase in temperature. So if you plot a graph over there, what it says, the plot of solubility versus temperature called the solubility curve for the above cases continues. However, it's a continuous graph over there. However, for sodium sulfate, calcium chloride, ammonium nitrate, which exists in alpha form and a beta form, like for example, these are the different allotropic forms, what it has over there. The solubility curves are discontinuous. For some solubility, it's a continuous curve, and for some of them, it's a discontinuous curve. So look at that. Calcium chloride, the curves over there, they are changing. It's increasing, but in a different form. Like say potassium nitrate, straight away it increases. It's basically as the temperature shoots up, NaCl is progressively increasing over there. If you see cerium sulfate, the solubility is decreasing. Same way, if I talk about over there sodium sulfate, look at that. First it increases and then it decreases over there. So this is mainly because of one, whatever are its allotropic forms, because at a particular temperature, one form is more stable as compared to the other. We have done in P block also, if you remember the alpha forms and the beta forms, what we are having with respect to sulfur over there. All right. The rhombic sulfur and the monoclinic sulfur form, where at a particular temperature, one allotropic form is more stable as compared to the other over there. So depending on that, we have the solubility curves over there. So here, most important with respect to MCQs, examples are important. Okay, whose solubility increases or decreases with respect to temperature. They can just ask examples on this. That is one. Then important information, Nernst distribution law, that is basically nothing but what it says. Nernst, we have done an electrochemistry part where we talk about the concentration term. That's the activity coefficient, what we call. Solute distributes itself between two immiscible solvents in such a way that the ratio of the concentration at a constant temperature. So what is it basically? Solute will distribute itself between two solvents in such a way that the ratio of the concentrations of the two solute in the solvent is constant. That is C1 by C2 is equal to K. That provided the solute does not undergo any dissociation or association. We have discussed dissociation, it gives more particles. Association, number of particles become less. Normally dissociation is of an ionic compound, association is due to hydrogen bonding. Then is extraction of a solute from an aqueous solution. A solvent immiscible in water is used for extraction. Same amount of solvent. For the same amount of solvent, the extraction is more if it contains more number of installments. In other words, multi-step extraction is more economical than a single step extraction. You have to extract in different steps, then the extraction is a better process. That is one. Now, solubility of gases. Now, this is the part what we'll be discussing, the Henry's law part. What does it say? What is solubility of a gas? It is the volume of a gas in ml converted to STP. That's the standard temperature pressure condition. Standard temperature, that's 273.15 Kelvin. Standard pressure of 1 atmosphere. Okay. Or basically in pascals, 1.01325 into 10 raised to 5 pascals. That can dissolve in unit volume of the liquid to form a saturated solution at a temperature at 1 atmospheric pressure. That is solubility. Solubility is expressed either in moles per liter, or it is also expressed in terms of mole fraction. All right, that is one. Now the factors affecting solubility, the nature of the gas as well as the solvent. So gases, like these are all non-polar gases, no difference in EM. Hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, they dissolve in water to a less extent. Like dissolves like. So these are non-polar, so less soluble in water. But gases which have charges, CO2, ammonia, HCl, they are highly soluble in water. Because like dissolves like, so they have charges, so more soluble in water, which has charges. Then comes Henry's law, which specifies that at a particular temperature, is this clear? The mass dissolved, that is the volume of a liquid, the solubility of a gas, that is a mass dissolved in a given volume of a liquid at a given temperature, is directly proportional to the pressure of the gas above the liquid. So solubility of a gas will be more, is this clear, at a given temperature if the pressure applied is more over there. So here we say M is nothing but the solubility or the mass, what we say is directly proportional to pressure. So M is equal to Kp, where mass can be written in terms of solubility, can be all, M can also be written as S. So we can have this as S proportional to P. So therefore S is equal to Kp, where K is the Henry constant. We also write it as Kh, and P is the pressure applied on the surface of the liquid. For the gases at equilibrium with the liquid, the solubility can be also expressed in terms of mole fractions. So mole fraction wise, we will say, then we say over there, X is nothing but mole fraction is Kh into Pa, where at unit is basically per atmosphere or per bar, that is a unit there. So we can also have this written it as P is equal to Kh into X. So the pressure with respect to the component A, so assuming it to be a binary solution, solute and solvent. So pressure due to A will be the Henry's constant multiplied by its mole fraction, that way. And the plot is a part over there, which is passing through the origin, which confirms the slope is nothing but Kh. All right, which means this confirms okay, whatever pressure is applied, is this clear? That pressure will correspond to only its mole fraction, meaning in other words, only the moles of that particular component, is this clear, will be miscible over there. That's the part. That's why it's passing from the origin and the slope is Kh. So at particular temperatures, you will see the oxygen and nitrogen, whatever are its solubility there. So Kh is a function of the nature of the gas. Greater the value of Kh, yes, lower is the solubility at the same temp, at the same pressure. That's true because P is equal to Kh into Xa. All right. Kh increases with increase in temperature. What does that imply? That the solubility decreases with increase in temperature at the same pressure. So these 2 points important with respect to the MCQs part. Then temperature part, people, this will be doing it. The Van 't Hoff equation is an extra part what we have. Okay, the solubility of a gas in a liquid decreases with increase in temperature, but the effect of temperature is also given by Van 't Hoff equation. That is ln C1 by C2. That is natural log, which is minus delta H by R. Delta H is the enthalpy change. That is the heat of the solution. R is our molar gas constant. That's 8.314 in terms of joules, or 0.08206 in terms of liter atmosphere. And T1 and T2 are its two different temperature at which the delta H is measured. That is one. So that is one part. Then this is important one. This is basically with respect to the free energy part. Delta G, change in free energy. Delta H, change in enthalpy. And delta S, change in entropy of solubility of a gas. Delta S is negative as gas in solution becomes less random, because entropy is the randomness. So but obviously the randomness decreases if a gas is soluble. So if randomness decreases, delta S is negative. Delta G is negative because the process is spontaneous. There's always a lowering of free energy. And delta H is negative. Is this clear? As only then delta G will be negative according to the equation. Delta, there's a not 4, it's a bracket. Delta G is equal to delta H minus T delta S. That's the Gibbs-Helmholtz equation, what we calculate. So dissolution of gas in water is always exothermic. It liberates heat. Solubility of a liquid increases with increase in pressure or decreases with temperature. So according to Henry's law, mass of a gas dissolved is directly proportional to the pressure, but volume of a gas dissolved is independent of pressure. Okay, they're just given a proof part over there. That is fair enough over there. Important is the applications of Henry's law. That is carbon dioxide bubbled in over there, nothing but the aerated drinks, because at high pressure, CO2 is soluble. So opening the atmospheric pressure, bottle of the, on opening, what's going to happen? The pressure is released, so the solubility decreases. Deep sea diving, the cylinder, compressed air cylinder is used, but nitrogen dissolved causes a disease called decompression sickness. That's called bends. Because nitrogen in the bloodstream enters at high pressure, and when you come up on the surface, there'll be bursting of the arteries. So to prevent that, what we do, we dilute it with helium. Helium being lighter will prevent nitrogen from entering the bloodstreams over there. And helium itself is less soluble in blood. Function of lungs, partial pressure of oxygen is high. It combines with hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin. In the tissues, partial pressure of oxygen is low. Therefore, oxygen is released from oxyhemoglobin for functions of the cell there. So this is basically the biological processes taking place. And people living at high altitudes. At high altitudes, atmospheric pressure is low. So if atmospheric pressure is low, concentration of oxygen in the blood and tissues is also low, which makes their thinking abilities low. And they suffer from a disease called anoxia. Anoxia is basically oxygen starvation. So if less amount of oxygen is going into the is being consumed in the less oxygen is consumed by the body over there, that leads to anoxia condition. That is the thinking abilities and their what I can call their their body immune is not that great. It is a low immune body what is there, and plus the thinking abilities are also low over there. That is one. Now talking about vapor pressure of liquids and Raoult's law. What exactly vapor pressure? Pressure exerted by the vapors of the liquid on its own surface at a given temperature is what we call as vapor pressure. Raoult's law with respect to solutions over there. We can have liquid is the solvent, solute may be solid, liquid or gas. Most important part is the liquid or the solid liquid solution is the vapor pressure. Okay. Now vapor pressure definitions are fine. Now Raoult's law, what it says over there, nothing but the vapor pressure of any component will be the vapor pressure of the pure component multiplied by its mole fraction. So it states that in a solution, the vapor pressure of a component, any one, solute or solvent, at a given temperature is equal to the mole fraction of that component multiplied by the vapor pressure of that component in the pure state. So P0A is the vapor pressure of the pure component multiplied by its mole fraction. Okay. So vapor pressure directly proportional to mole fraction. So we put it this way, P of A directly proportional to XA. So therefore, P of A is equal to P0A into XA. Same way, other component PB and the total pressure, that is vapor pressure of A plus vapor pressure of B, that is XAPA plus XBPB. So we basically, if I equate this, now we can write over here, very simple. I can write XA as 1 minus XB because sum of mole fraction is unity. So total vapor pressure is XB into P0A minus P0B minus P0A plus P0 of A over there. That's going to be over there, nothing but total pressure there. And this comes out to be a straight line. When you plot the vapor pressure total with respect to it, that is Look at that carefully. Vapor pressure when I plot with mole fraction. Initially, we just have one component. So XA starts from 0 and goes till 1. So look at that. That is this one. P of A is P naught A into XA. And same way for XB. When I start with mole fraction of the second component from 0 to 1, that is this formula. PB, that is P naught B into XB. And the total, these are the intercepts formed over here. That is P naught A and P naught B. And that's the total pressure. That is vapor pressure of A plus vapor pressure of B there. Raoult's law is applicable only if the two components forms a homogeneous mixture. All right. Next, what it says. This is so only if they have similar structures, like ideal solutions. All right. Like for example, benzene and toluene, hexane and heptane. These are called ideal solutions. The law is not applicable if they are not completely miscible. Now, the vapor phase contains vapors of both. The mole fraction of the vapor phase is calculated as, yes, Y of A, that's P of A, pressure of A upon A plus B. So we have over there nothing but what we can call as PA upon P total. So sometimes if they're asking you in the MCQ, the mole fraction in the vapor phase, then it is the vapor pressure of A upon the total pressure. And same way, Y of B, that will be PB upon P total. All right. Total vapor pressure increases if more volatile component is added and decreases if less volatile component. People, very simple. Volatile, the one which boils below 100 degrees centigrade. So as temperature increases, vapors will come off both solute as well as solvent. If it is a volatile solute dissolved in a volatile solvent. But if it is a non-volatile solute like salt dissolved in water, then the vapors coming on the surface, that is of water, will be less if NaCl is dissolved in water, because NaCl is a volatile, is a non-volatile solute, and water is a volatile solvent. Certain NaCl particles will trap those water molecules. So it is difficult for the water molecules to escape out. So vapor pressure decreases. So if you add a volatile solute to a volatile solvent, both the vapors will come. So vapor pressure increases. And if you add a non-volatile solute, it traps the solvent particles to itself. Hence its vapor pressure decreases. Then Conovol's rule, people, that's an extra part what we have over there. What it says, at a fixed temperature, the vapor pressure is always more richer in the more volatile component as compared to the solution phase. In other words, mole fraction of more volatile component is always greater in the vapor phase than in the solution phase. Yes. So in solution phase, you will have solute is always less as compared to solvent, but in the gaseous state, more vapors will come because more the volatile compound, vapors will come faster. Or alternatively, vapor phase is relatively richer in the component whose addition to the liquid mixture results in an increase in the total vapor pressure. So to increase the total vapor pressure, if I have a volatile liquid, then the vapors will come faster. So the vapor pressure in the gaseous state, is this clear, will be more as compared to the liquid state, because in liquid state, the vapors will not come that easily. In the vapor phase, already the temperature is higher, so the vapors are more of the volatile component. Then effect of adding a non-volatile solute on the vapor pressure. Addition of non-volatile solute will decrease the vapor pressure, because I told you, they will be trapped. Solute particles will trap some of the solvent molecules, because some molecules of the solvent are replaced by the molecules of solute, like hydration, NaCl in water. So chloride will trap the OH ions around it, and the Cl ions will trap the H plus ions. So water molecules will not come that easily on the surface. Vapor pressure of solutions of solids in liquids. Raoult's law for non-volatile solute. Now from this part, it's very simple. Vapor pressure of a solvent is equal to mole fraction into the vapor pressure of pure solvent. If the solute is non-volatile, its vapors are not coming only. So vapor pressure of a solution is vapor pressure of pure solvent into its mole fraction. Because there is no solute particle is non-volatile, so its vapors will not come. And this is proved that vapor pressure of a solution is directly proportional to x1, meaning when I heat NaCl in water, vapors coming on the surface will be only of water, not of NaCl. Okay. And that confirms because it's a graph passing from the origin, which confirms it starts over here when x of A is 0, and where it cuts over there. Is this clear? We will say there XA is equal to 1. And if I talk in terms of the vapor pressure on the y-axis, then where it cuts, that's going to be 1 atmosphere. When we say vapor pressure is equal to its atmospheric pressure, that's its boiling point. Clear? That's one part. And from that, the calculation, PS upon P naught is equal to X1, vapor pressure of solution. So from this first equation only what we got, PS is X1 into P naught. So we can write PS by P naught is X1. X1 is N1 upon N1 plus N2. So basically when I equate it, I get the formula for relative lowering of vapor pressure. So P naught minus PS. PS is vapor pressure upon P naught. So vapor relative lowering is equal to mole fraction of solute. So one is lowering of vapor pressure, that is delta P, P naught minus P, or PS you can say, vapor pressure of solution. And second is delta P upon P naught is equal to X2. All right. So relative lowering of vapor pressure, that's a colligative property over there. So the Raoult's law for non-volatile solute, the relative lowering is equal to the mole fraction of solute. Okay. So one we had vapor pressure of solution is vapor pressure of pure component of the solvent multiplied by its mole fraction. One is always for solvent and two is for solute. Then variation of vapor pressure with respect to the Clapeyron equation. This again, it's an extra part what we have, that is relating it to the thermodynamics part, that is the log of P2 by P1 is delta H of vaporization, liquid to gas, upon 2.303 R, 1 upon T1 minus 1 upon T2. We'll be doing a similar equation in chemical kinetics. It's clear. That'll be with respect to its what we can call as the rate constant part, similar type of an equation, where P1 is the vapor pressure of the liquid at temperature T1 and P2 is at temperature T2. Delta HV, enthalpy of vaporization. R we know, that is in 8.314 joules. So from the above formula can also be used to find the boiling point T2 at pressure T2 when boiling point T1 and P1 are known. So you can find any one of the variable with this formula. That's an extra part, but then difference between hygroscopic and deliquescent substances. Now both absorb moisture from air. However, hygroscopic substances do not change their state, like glycerol, whereas deliquescent substances dissolve into it, like NaOH. So hygroscopic will just absorb moisture over there, but there's no change of state. But deliquescent will absorb moisture and they will change their state. That's what it says. So it says over there, both of them absorb moisture because vapor pressure of their saturated solution is less than the water vapors present in the atmospheres. Both these are highly soluble. On the other hand, sodium carbonate .10 water, that is basically what we call as nothing but washing soda, okay, which loses their water of crystallization and disintegrate to form a powdery substance called as an efflorescent. So it loses water to form its nothing but what we can call as soda ash. They do so if their crystals have vapor pressure greater than the water vapors in the atmosphere at that temperature. So two things to understand here, hygroscopic and deliquescent, both absorb moisture, but in hygroscopic, there is no change of state, but deliquescent, there'll be a change in its state over there. And that can be explained on the basis of its vapor pressure. Now, ideal and non-ideal solution. What is the concept of ideal solution? Two components, solute A and solvent, when they are mixed over there, On mixing the solute and solvent, there is no change in the volume. There is no change in its enthalpy. Is this clear? Then that's what we call as an ideal solution over there. Okay. In other words, there is no interaction between the solute and solvent. Solute in which the interactions between A and B are of the same magnitude as that of pure components, and the solution when there is no volume change, no enthalpy change. So ideal solution, benzene, toluene, hexane, heptane, ethyl bromide, ethyl iodide, chlorobenzene, bromobenzene. All right. In other words, there is no association, there is no dissociation between the solute and solvent. Non-ideal solution over there where there are interactions. Matlab on mixing, there is change in volume as well as change in enthalpy. There are good solute solvent interactions between the two over there that we have. So now we'll talk about the two deviations. Non-ideal solution showing positive deviation. What is positive deviation? I've told you all. Solute and solvent interactions are stronger than solute-solvent interaction. I repeat, positive deviation, solute and solvent interactions are stronger than solute-solvent interaction. So when I heat this non-ideal solution, where the solute and the solvent interaction are stronger, on the surface, both vapors will come of solute as well as solvent. So the net vapor pressure increases. That's called a positive deviation. All right, see that part. When total vapor pressure of any mole fraction is more than expected from Raoult's law, where the new interactions are weaker than the pure components. That's what it says. New interactions are weaker, meaning solute-solvent interaction is weaker than solute and solvent-solvent, like ethanol and cyclohexane. The hydrogen bonding in pure ethanols are cut off on adding cyclohexane. So that's why the change in volume and change in enthalpy are positive. Solution showing negative deviations. Solute-solvent interaction is stronger than solute or solvent-solvent interaction. So if solute-solvent interaction is stronger over there, both, when the temperature increases, their vapors don't come easily on the surface. That's called negative deviation. When the total mole fraction, when the total vapor pressure of any mole fraction is less than expected, this is because new interactions are stronger than pure components. Like chloroform and acetone, they form hydrogen bonding. Look at that. Chloroform CHCl3 acetone, hydrogen bonding between the O of oxygen and the H of chloroform. Then in this case, both the delta H and delta V are negative. So the examples over there with respect to positive and negative deviations over there. All right. Then graphical representation of both. Now look at that part. This is what I can call as the first graph, what you see on top. This is of positive deviation because XA starts from 0 to 1. So that was the curve, what I call as, and it forms an intercept P naught A. Same way, if I talk about the B part, it starts from XB0 and goes till mole fraction 1, forms an intercept over there P naught B. So ideal solution, this should have been. But both vapors are coming. Why? Because solute-solvent interaction is weaker. So both are coming. What is happening? This was the ideal and this is the actual part. This line, what I'm drawing. So that's called a positive deviation. Vapor pressure is more than expected. Ideally, it should have been the line which is down there. Ideally, ye line pe hona chahiye. That's the ideal condition. But it is more than that. Same way, you are having over there nothing but this is negative deviation. So the above one is positive. That's this one, the negative deviation. Look at that. XA to 1, that's the intercept P naught A. And XB over there, XB 0 to 1, that's the intercept P naught B. So this should be the ideal, but solute-solvent interaction is stronger. So vapors are not coming immediately on the surface. So the total vapor pressure is less than expected. So this is the ideal. And what is found is this. It is less than expected. That's called the negative deviation. Okay. Azeotropic mixtures. What is azeotropic mixtures? You mix two compounds, is this clear, in a definite proportion by weight such that they have constant boiling points. Two compounds mixed in a definite proportion by weight such that their boiling point is constant. Then those are called azeotropic mixture. Spelling mistake here. It's azeotropic mixture. Two liquids boil at a particular temperature over the same composition. Okay, that's they are called constant boiling mixtures. Azeotrope with minimum boiling point. Boiling point is less than either of the two components. This is formed by composition of non-ideal showing positive deviation. Positive deviation matlab their vapor pressure is maximum because both vapors are coming, like mixture of ethanol and water. Now that basically 95.4% ethanol forms an azeotropic mixture having a boiling point of 351.15 Kelvin. So ethanol and water, what is happening? Their own. Why positive deviation? Because the solute solvent interaction, that is hydrogen bonding in ethanol and water, is weaker than the hydrogen bonding in pure ethanol and pure water. So that's why they show positive deviation, because both vapors come, but the boiling point decreases because of weaker intermolecular interactions. So 95.4% ethanol with balance water over there. That is nothing but 4.6% water over there. Then that will have a constant boiling point of 351.15 Kelvin. But actual ethanol is 351.3 and water is 373. But this 95.4% ethanol and 4.6% ethanol, the boiling point of this mixture will be lesser due to positive deviation. Azeotropic mixture with maximum boiling point. This was a question what was asked with respect to the neat part. All right, what it forms. Okay, who forms the, they will not ask you, keep in mind, they will not ask you the boiling points. No statistical data is asked in the paper. Keep in mind, it is mainly the examples what they ask. What it says, boiling point is more than either of the two components. This is formed when it shows a negative deviation. For example, a mixture of nitric acid and water. Nitric acid is 359, water is 373. Now 68% nitric acid, 68% nitric acid and 32% water. Dono ka boiling point together by this way, 68% nitric acid and 32% water will have a boiling point of 393.5 Kelvin, more than the both, due to negative deviation, because the solute solvent interaction is stronger of nitric acid and water due to H bonding. Then relationship between mole fraction of the components of the ideal solution in liquid phase and that in the vapor phase. Now here, if I have to compare with respect to the mole fraction parts, yes. So here it's a linear graph, what will come over there, because P of A is XA into P naught of A, PB is P naught B into XB, and the mole fraction of one of them in the vapors will be the vapors of A upon the total vapors of the solution over there. So that if you equate and calculate, we are getting over there what it says, plot of 1 upon XA or 1 upon Y will be a linear with the slope P naught A upon P naught B, and the intercept is P naught B minus P naught A upon P naught B. So what are we trying to conclude over there? Then it says over there, what is the part over there? The mole fractions of the component in the liquid phase and that in the vapor phase. So you can have the relationship, that is the vapor pressure is directly proportional to its mole fraction. Then relation between mole fraction of one component in the vapors and the total vapor pressure, that is X of A will be, if you equate the both, a Y of A, that is the total pressure with respect to A, will be, means if I say mole fraction of Y in form of vapors, so you will have the pressure of A upon the total. Okay, and that if we equate comes as X of A mole fraction is equal to P naught B into YB upon P naught A plus the difference between the vapors of B and A into YA. That is one. And same way we can put it over there. With respect to YA, if I write it, that is PA upon P total, then putting the values, we can have this formula, which indicates the plot of 1 by the total pressure versus It's basically linear with respect to y of a. Then it says vapor pressure composition diagram for non-ideal solutions. Yeah, what is this part? It's an inform part over there, just informative. At any temperature, the composition of the vapor phase is not the same as of the liquid phase. We have different vapor pressure, vapor composition curve. Like see, figure 1, what it shows over here. Yeah, represents vapor pressure versus liquid phase and vapor phase composition diagram for non-ideal solution, showing maximum in the total vapor pressure of non-ideal, showing positive deviation. So look here, this is the positive deviation, where what is happening here, you have over there, mole fractions are being put up over there with respect to the component A and component B. So what is happening here, both the vapors are coming on the surface. So that's what we call as a positive deviation. Whereas figure 1B is basically this is a negative deviation. That is when you're mixing the two and there will be solute solvent interactions. So these graphs are similar to the positive and the negative deviations. So it says over there, represent these curves for solution with minimum showing negative deviation up till point C, as B is more volatile than A. Vapor phase is richer in B, and beyond C, vapor pressure is richer in A. So what is happening? Wherever the vapor, whoever is more volatile, that vapors will come faster on the surface, and the less volatile, is this clear, is the one whose vapors will come later. That's what it says. So that's the negative deviation part. Then boiling point composition for non-ideal solution. How do you represent over there? Lower the vapor pressure, higher is the boiling point. True, because the vapor pressure is lesser, vapors will come faster on it. The boiling point when given by 1A, 1B may be drawn as 2A or 2B. In this, what it says, now 2A or 2B is this part of category where it says point C represents the azeotrope with lowest boiling point. Point C, that's the azeotropic mixture. Whereas it says in 2B, point D represents the azeotrope with highest boiling point. Yes, because this is a negative deviation, that's a positive deviation. So depending upon, whose vapors and the liquids. So one is basically the vapor phase and one is the liquid phase. So whose vapors are coming faster, that will be a more volatile liquid, and less vapors will be for a non-volatile liquid or a less volatile liquid. Figures from this azeotropic mixture, the composition of the liquid and vapor phase are equal. Hence, they distill over a pure liquid. Fractional distillation of any mixture will give the pure liquid and an azeotrope. Now, this is a very important point. Fractional distillation, separating a mixture of two or more liquids having a difference in their boiling point, is this clear, at the same temperature. So we will say fractional distillation of any mixture with composition of either side of the azeotrope will give one pure liquid and an azeotrope. So if you do a fractional distillation, one liquid will come and the other will be the mixture coming over. That is one. So these are the two graphs representing that. Now, partial pressure of two immiscible liquids and principle of steam distillation. We have discussed steam distillation, aniline and water, right? Aniline is immiscible in water, so it is purified by steam distillation. What was steam distillation? Liquids which are immiscible in water, but in presence of steam, their volatility increases. That's called steam distillation. When a mixture of two immiscible liquids is heated at a temperature, each liquid exerts vapor pressure equal to that of the pure liquid. Hence, for the mixture, pressure total is P0A plus P0B. So there, if we equate, we can now calculate the molar masses, and we will be talking about the colligative properties. At boiling point, atmospheric pressure is 1 atmosphere. Yes, that's a definition. P0 of A and P0 of B are less than 1 atmosphere. That is, each liquid boils at a lower temperature than its normal boiling point. So if Na and Nb are the mole fractions, we can have P0A is directly proportional. So we can have this as P0A upon P0B is Na by Nb. Number of moles is given mass upon molar mass. So we can also have the formula in terms of Wa upon Ma is equal to P0A upon Wb by Mb is equal to P0B. So hence we say, thus in the given ratio of the masses A and B, in which the liquid mixture will distill. In steam distillation, one of the liquids is an organic liquid immiscible in water and the other one is steam. like I said, no, aniline in water. Aniline is an organic compound, so it's immiscible in water. All right. And the other component has to be water over there. So that is one part. Now comes colligative properties. Colligative comes from the Greek word colligatis, meaning collected together. Those properties which depends on the number of particles present and does not depend on the nature of the solvent, then those are called colligative properties. Like relative lowering of vapor pressure is equal to mole fraction of solute. So more the solute particles, we will say greater will be the relative lowering. Osmotic pressure, that's pi. External pressure required to stop osmosis, that's delta P upon P naught. Elevation in boiling point, delta TB. More the number of solute particle, greater is the elevation in the boiling point. Depression in freezing point, delta TF. More the number of particles, greater is the lowering of freezing point. So if the particles are more, the boiling point and the osmotic pressure increases. And if more are the particles, the vapor pressure and the freezing point decreases. So elevation in boiling point and depression in freezing point are colligative, but not boiling point and freezing point. Why? Boiling point and freezing point are intensive properties. They are independent of the amount of substance present. Like I take 1 ml, 10 ml, 100 ml, 1000 ml water. Water will boil at 373 Kelvin only. So it doesn't matter how much water I took. But elevation, yes, it will depend on the amount over there. Okay. Solution of non-electrolytes, the one which doesn't give ions, no association, no dissociation. Glucose, urea, they have same molar concentration, will have the same value of the particular colligative property. So now seeing each one, relative lowering. Now relative lowering wise, we can calculate the formulas over there. First is P naught minus PS upon P naught is equal to N2 upon N1 plus N2, where we say in the new denominator, N2 is neglected because the solution is very, very dilute. So we have the formula, that is a part over there. P naught minus P upon P naught is equal to W2 by M2 upon W1 by M1. So we can here calculate M2, which is the molar mass of the non-volatile solute. An important info to understand, all colligative properties are inversely proportional to their molar masses. Remember that. Okay. So delta P, lowering of vapor pressure, is this clear? Will be inversely proportional to its molar mass. Formula can be rewritten as, yes, P01, that is the part. Calculation of molar mass can be done. Yes, that's the part. Measurement of relative lowering of vapor pressure. Yes, relative lowering I have told you all, that is P naught minus P upon P naught is equal to X2. All right. So what it says now, measurement, Ostwald-Walker method, that's a practical method, means the practical approach, which we don't have in the syllabus over there. All right. You can do it from that method. They have given the calculations, how it works, where you have basically the, what I can call, the diagram is not specified here. You have a Ostwald-Walker method is where basically you have the bulbs. You take these glass bulbs, where in one you take pure solvent, and in the other one over there, nothing but, we have a solution just to check if pure solvent will have high vapor pressure. Pure solvent will have a high vapor pressure as compared to a solution, because solution, the vapors don't come easily. Okay. So pure dry air is passed through the bulbs containing solution, and then through bulbs containing pure solvent, and finally containing calcium chloride. So what happens is, in pure solvent, the weight will be lost because vapors will go out. So loss in weight of the solution bulbs is W1, what we call, that is the vapor pressure of solution. Loss in solvent bulb is W2, that is the solvent minus the solution, because in pure solvent, maximum vapors will come. Solution, the vapors coming will be less. So from that part also, we can equate it. Okay, PS is directly proportional to W1, the vapor pressure of the solution. Is this clear? will be proportional to W1, that is the weight of the solvent, and P minus PS, matlab the lowering of vapor pressure, is directly proportional to W2. Okay, so we can have the equation and we can calculate what it says. Loss in W2 is equal to nothing but loss in weight of the solvent bulbs upon total loss of the weight in the solution and solvent bulbs, or increase in the weight, because calcium chloride is one which will absorb all the moisture. So all the vapors which are coming. So what is done first? We take what I can call glass tubes or glass bulbs, where first in the glass bulbs you have solvent. So dry air is made to pass. So the vapors will get saturated only with the vapors of pure solvent. The same vapors. So it's basically like this. I'll just show you in short. I have bulbs over there. All right. And they are connected. Here there is basically air is passed over there. These two are pure solvent. These two are solution. And then it is further connected, and these vapors are made to pass into calcium chloride vessel. By calcium chloride, vapors will come. So in pure solvent, when air is passed, air will get saturated only with the vapors of pure solvent. That air saturated already with the vapors of solvent, when it goes into the solution, it absorbs some more vapors, but less now, because solution, we all know vapor pressure is less because the solute is non-volatile. This air, which has absorbed the vapors of the solvent and solution, is made to pass into the calcium chloride tube, where they are absorbed. So in calcium chloride, we have total. That's what it says. P0 minus PS is equal to W2 upon W1 plus W2. So understand carefully now. Just see this part. Loss in weight of solvent, that is, this is solvent, W1, will be the vapor pressure of the solution, because pure vapors will only come. Because solution mein se the vapors taken will be negligible, right? Because the solute is non-volatile. Loss in weight of the solvent tubes. So what is done is, they have done, okay, they have put it up over here as, this is written as W2. So solvent is W2 and that's W1. That's how they have shown. Okay. So loss in weight of solution. So solution, when the vapors go, first it goes into pure solvent, then it goes into the solution. Okay. So in the solution, it will be proportional to P, that is the vapor pressure of the solution. Loss in weight of solvent will be nothing but the difference, right? Solvent minus solution, because pure solvent vapors are greater as compared to solution. And that's how, and whatever is increase in the calcium chloride tube will be nothing but the loss in weight in the pure solvent, that is nothing but pure solvent is W2 as well as solution W1. So whatever vapors have been given out, they will be absorbed by the air, and that air is condensed in the calcium chloride tube. So the increase in the calcium chloride tube is basically the vapors coming from pure solvent as well as from pure solution. Then comes osmosis and osmotic pressure. Now we all know osmosis is basically nothing but flow of solvent from a region of high solvent concentration to a region of low solvent concentration across a semi-permeable membrane, or flow of solvent from a dilute solution to a concentrated solution, or flow of solvent from a region of high vapor pressure to a region of low vapor pressure. That's osmosis. Now, through the semi-permeable membrane. Now, osmotic pressure is the external pressure which we apply on the solution to stop osmosis. All right, that pressure is called osmotic pressure. So that's the part where we had for osmotic pressure. If you see the relationship, pi is equal to 1, we had pi is equal to h rho g, where h is the height of the column, rho is the density, and g is its acceleration due to gravity there. Expression part we all know. As per the Van 't Hoff-Boyle's law, it is clear when we are expressing pi is how we got this equation, pi is equal to CRT. Very simple. So to express this pi is equal to CRT, we have one is Van 't Hoff-Boyle's law, where we said pi is inversely proportional to volume, and second was Van 't Hoff-Charles law, that is pi is directly proportional to temperature over there. So once we equate, we got the part over there, pi is equal to CRT. Like how we did the ideal gas equation, PV is nRT. Here we have pi is equal to CRT, where C can be written as N by V RT. So pi is equal to N by V RT, and N is the number of moles, which is the given mass upon its molar mass. So I can call this as W2 upon M2. And that if I put it up, I have this formula. M2 is equal to W2 RT upon pi V, where W2 2 corresponds to solute. So weight of solute. Achha, most important here, value of R. Value of R is decided by pi and V. Osmotic pressure pi in atmosphere, volume in liters, then R will be liter atmosphere, 0.08206. Osmotic pressure pi in terms of pascals or Newton per meter square, and volume in meter cube, R will be in joules, 8.314 joules per Kelvin per mole. Again, osmotic pressure pi, which is a colligative property, and molar mass, they are inversely proportional. Okay. So osmotic pressure, external pressure applied on the solution to stop osmosis. Reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis is what? If pressure more than the osmotic pressure is applied on the solution, then reverse osmosis takes place. That is, solvent from the solution will enter the pure solvent. So if the pressure more than the osmotic pressure is applied on the solution separated by the semi-permeable membrane, then net flow of solvent from solution to the solvent through the semi-permeable membrane is called RO, reverse osmosis, like the desalination of seawater. Is this clear? That is, you remove salts from the seawater. Then isotonic solutions. Isotonic solution is what? Isotonic is basically across the semi-permeable membrane. We will say the molar concentrations are identical. So it's basically, whenever I say the word isotonic solutions, C1 is equal to C2. They have the same molar concentrations. So we can have over there as nothing but W1 by M1 into V1 is equal to W2 by, because C is nothing but N by V, and N is nothing but the given weight upon its molecular weight. So that's why W1 by M1 into V1 is equal to W2 by M2 into V2 is nothing but C1 by C2. Okay. Hypotonic and hypertonic solutions. Hypotonic is basically whenever we have water entering into the blood cells and the blood cells will bloat up over there. That condition is called hypotonic conditions. And hypertonic is whenever there is shrinking. Is this clear? So if there's a shrinking of any of the vessels, blood vessels over there, then that condition is what we call as hypertonic. Let's put this example. Solution having same osmotic pressure as that of the other is isotonic. Solution having less osmotic pressure, that is lower concentration than the other, is called hypotonic. Is this clear? So solution having, catch carefully. So if I say water enters the blood cells, so water is hypotonic with respect to the blood cells because water doesn't have any solute. So water will have less osmotic pressure because particles in here water, it's pure water. So water has low osmotic pressure as compared to the other. So water is hypotonic with respect to the blood cells. All right. Same way, a solution having higher osmotic pressure, is this clear, than the other, higher than the other, is called hypertonic solutions. Like for example, now if I'm saying solution having higher osmotic pressure. So if I'm taking an egg, removing the, what I can call the shell of it, and that egg is kept into a salt solution, what will be this? What will be observed after some time? The egg ka jo white colored is there, that is the, what I can call the egg white, what we call, that will be the semi-permeable membrane, and the yolk inside is going to be my solution inside. So what's going to happen if I keep it in egg solution, if I keep that egg in a salt solution, that egg in a salt solution, the egg is going to shrink, the yolk will come out. What exactly happened? The yolk concentration was less as compared to the salt solution in what it was kept, because salt solution will have more particles, so it will exert more osmotic pressure. So the salt solution is hypertonic with respect to the egg yolk over there. Okay, so that's what it says. Solution having higher osmotic pressure, that is a salt, as compared to the other is called hypertonic. So always remember, solvent moves from hypotonic to hypertonic till it becomes isotonic. Solvent moves from hypotonic to hypertonic till it becomes isotonic. Hypo to hyper till it becomes iso. 0.91% weight by weight of NaCl is isotonic with the human blood. That is a saline that is given to us. If a saline concentration is less than 0.91%, it will become hypotonic and the blood cells will swell up. That's hypotonic. Because if the concentration is less, water will enter the blood cells and even burst. NaCl solution with concentration greater than 0.91 will allow it to shrink. The blood cells will shrink because the cell wall will be the semi-permeable membrane, because NaCl is hypertonic, more concentrated as compared to the blood cells. Now we have different terms over here. Pressure developed inside the cell due to inflow of water is called turgor. Shrinking of the cell is called plasmolysis or crenation. Swelling of the cell followed by rupture is called hemolysis. Outflow of water from a cell is called exoosmosis, whereas inflow is called as endoosmosis. This is basically the biological terms what is there. And its experimental method is the Hartley and the Berkeley method what we have to determine osmosis. That is, an osmometer solution is the osmometer is taken, where we have compartments of solute solvent, and there's a pressure gauge where we can apply pressure on the solution to stop osmosis and gauge the pressure which is applied. Their experimental approaches are not there. We only are having the normal theoretical part and its formulas over there. Advantage of osmotic pressure method for polymers. Now, normally, osmotic pressure method is the best method to calculate the molar mass, because even if the dilute solutions are there, we can measure it in terms of millimeters because it's osmotic pressure. So for very dilute solutions also, we can gauge the exact pressure. That's why we say osmotic pressure measurements are more accurate and more better. Osmotic pressure is the best method for determination, because for polymers, observed value is too low to be measured accurately. Osmotic pressure can be measured in millimeters also. That's why over there, we can measure the values of polymers also. One, the difference between isoosmotic and isotonic solution with respect to semi-permeable membrane. Mostly semi-permeable membranes are not perfect. If two solutions have same osmotic pressure with respect to a particular semi-membrane, then they are said to be isotonic. If two solutions have same osmotic pressure with respect to a perfect semi-permeable membrane, they are said to be isoosmotic. In such cases only. So what does the difference mean? Difference is basically with respect to because see, it depends on the pressure. Semi-permeable membrane should be able to resist pressure. Then only we will say, okay, that membrane is a good membrane. Okay. So if the two solutions have the same osmotic pressure, is this clear? With respect to any membrane, then that's isotonic condition. But if they have the same osmotic pressure, is this clear? With respect to a perfect semi-permeable membrane, a perfect membrane means what? The ones which can resist pressure. Then they are also said to be isoosmotic. Then the next colligative property are now for osmotic pressure related to CRT. As I told you, that concentration part, value of R will be decided with respect to the concentration, or pi V decides the value of R. So CRT, liter atmosphere, pi is in atmosphere, then it is so many liter atmosphere. If pi is bar, we all know 1 bar is 1.01325 into 10⁵ pascals. So the answer would be in joules. Pi in Newton per meter square, moles per meter cube. 1 joule is 1 Newton meter. Only two things, pi and V, will decide the value of R. Percentage here, osmotic pressure, that's mass by volume, unless density is given. Molar masses, that's W2RT upon pi V. Two solutions are isotonic over there. They have the same molar concentration. Yeah, C1 is equal to C2. If two solutions are mixed, calculate the molar masses in the final solution, and total pi can be given as N1 plus N2 upon V into RT. That is the number of moles, because C by V is equal to nothing but number of moles over there. C is equal to N by V, number of moles upon volume. Then comes elevation in boiling point. Yeah. What is boiling point? Temperature at which the vapor pressure becomes equal to atmospheric pressure. Okay. So what is it now? Pure solvent. If I plot vapor pressure versus temperature, pure solvent boils at a particular temperature, but this is the atmospheric pressure, which is 1 atmosphere. So this I call it as T0B, boiling point of pure solvent, where its vapor pressure becomes equal to atmospheric pressure. But if I talk about a solution boils at a higher temperature as compared to a pure solvent. Why? Because in case of a solution, solvent particles are trapped by the solute. So to supply more pressure, or to supply more temperature, sorry, so that the boiling point increases. So solution will always have a higher boiling point as compared to a pure solvent. And that's why we have that temperature is TB when its atmospheric pressure becomes equal to 1 atmosphere. And this difference is what I call as delta TB. So delta TB, elevation in boiling point, will be TB minus T0B. TB, boiling point of solution, T0B, boiling point of pure solvent. And elevation is going to be an colligative property. It depends on the number of particles. And we have discussed all colligative properties. If you remember how delta TB is proportional to M, if you remember, I've discussed with you. 1 mole of glucose, 1 mole of glucose, 1 mole of sucrose, 1 mole of urea. Glucose 1 mole, 180 grams. Sucrose 1 mole, 342 grams. 1 mole urea, 60 grams. All three dissolved in 1 kg of water. Then all will have the same values of delta TB. What does that mean? What is the common factor in all the three? All three have different masses, but all three are dissolved in 1 kg of water. Now, which is the concentration unit which depends on the mass of solvent? Has to be molality, small m. That's why it says, if all three dissolved in 1 kg of water have the same elevation in boiling point, means they are directly proportional to the molality of the solution. So delta TB is proportional to M, which is equal to delta TB is Kb into M, where Kb is the constant called the molar elevation constant or the ebullioscopic constant. Ebulliо means to elevate, to increase its boiling point. So if molality is 1 mole per kg, then delta TB is equal to Kb. So in other words, we can say the molar elevation constant Kb is the elevation in boiling point produced for 1 molar solution. That is 1 mole of a solute dissolved in 1000 grams or 1 kg of pure solvent. Unit of Kb, Kelvin kg per mole, or you can write it as Kelvin per molality, because Kb is delta TB by M. So Kelvin per molality or Kelvin kg per mole. And remember, delta TB is the difference in the two temperature, which can be anything. Do not get confused. Normally what happens, we have boiling point in degrees Celsius. We say that degrees Celsius, you convert it to Kelvin part. But change jo hai, delta TB, that will remain the same only. Chahe you keep it in Kelvin or you keep it in degrees Celsius. It's a change only. Then depending on this part, delta TB is Kb into M. We can calculate the molar mass, because molar mass formula we have. Sorry, not molar mass, molality formula. So delta TB is Kb into M, where we know what is M, W2 by M2 into 1000 upon W1, subject to all are in grams. If they were in kg, then the numerator is out and we have the formula for molar mass. That's 1000 into Kb into W2 upon delta TB into W1. If W1, W2 are going to be in grams, then 1000 can be removed in the numerator. And using this, we also can calculate the enthalpy change, delta H. That is, Kb is Mr T0 the whole square upon 1000 into delta H vapor. M1 molar mass of the pure solvent, T naught B boiling point of the pure solvent, R is the molar gas constant, and delta H vapor is its enthalpy of vaporization. 1 mole of liquid changes to 1 mole of a gas. That's one. All those terms. Then values of KBR, that is the part. Delta TB also you can calculate the similar manner from that formula only. Now depression in freezing point. Now what happens with respect to freezing point? What is the part over there? It's a temperature in which the liquid and solid form of the same substance are in equilibrium. In other words, they have the same vapor pressure. So due to lower vapor pressure of solution, solid from solution separates out at a lower temperature. Is this clear? In the given figure over there. Now what happens over there? When I'm talking about a solution, solid is anyways, the solute is anyway solid. It is a liquid solvent of the solution, which freezes and becomes a solid solvent. So when that happens, we say that is the point where the both vapor pressures of the liquid and the solid becomes equal. So delta TF is T naught F minus F, meaning addition of a non-volatile solute lowers the freezing point. The freezing point of pure solvent is greater than that of a solution. That's why delta TF is T naught F minus TF. Look at the curves carefully. Here it was a liquid solvent, it became a solid solvent. So that is the freezing point. So I call this as this variable, T naught F. Now when a solution freezes, it is the liquid solvent of the solution that will freeze and become a solid. Okay. So what has happened? Solvent, it freezes over here. Once it freezes, it also is becoming a solid solvent only. So that's why the curve is common. So this curve, what you see, what I'm showing, that's a common curve of basically the liquid solvent has become the solid solvent. So addition of a non-volatile solute lowers the freezing point. So here the freezing point of solution is lowered because here it was the liquid solvent from solution and here it has become the solid solvent. Okay. So that's TF. So that difference is delta TF. And like boiling point elevation, freezing point, delta TF is also directly proportional to molality. So we can have the formula delta TF is proportional to M, or delta TF is KF into M, where KF is called the molar depression constant or the cryoscopic constant. Delta TF is KF into M, molar depression constant or the cryoscopic constant. Same units, Kelvin kg per mole or Kelvin per molality. So KF is defined as KB only. So KF is the molar depression constant produced when 1 mole of a solute is dissolving. Is this clear? 1 kg of a solvent. Unit is the same, Kelvin per molality or Kelvin kg per mole. And same way molar mass, 1000 into W2 into KF upon delta TF into W1, where W1 and W2 are in grams. If they are in kg, then the 1000 can be removed. And similarly, you can calculate the molar depression constant from enthalpy of fusion. That is MR T naught, the whole square, upon 1000 into delta H of fusion, where M1, molar mass of the solvent, R, the molar gas constant, T naught, that's going to be the freezing point of pure solvent, delta H fusion, enthalpy change for fusion when 1 mole of a solid becomes 1 mole of a liquid. That's the part. Now values are given of KB and all. Important part mainly is water. Water KB is 0.52, meaning when 1 mole of a non-volatile solute is added to 1000 grams or 1 kg of water, the boiling point of water is elevated by 0.52 Kelvin. So boiling point of water increases by 0.52 Kelvin. Same way, if I talk about the KF of water, that's 1.86. What does that mean? When 1 mole of a non-volatile solute is added to 1000 grams or 1 kg of water, the freezing point of water is lowered by 1.86 Kelvin. Okay, so like that it's given there for all the compounds what we have. Where camphor, very important. This is an important one. its Kf is 39.7, meaning 1 mole of a non-volatile solute when dissolved in 1 kg of camphor, the freezing point of camphor will be lowered by 39.7 Kelvin. So more the depression in the freezing point, greater is the magnitude of delta TF, and greater the magnitude of delta TF, better accuracy in calculating M2, that is the molar mass of the non-volatile solute. So remember that greater the now see in water, the difference is only 0.52 and 1.86. Difference is not great. That's why molar mass you will calculate, but the accuracy will not be that great. That's why we say osmotic pressure is a better way to get the accuracy of the molar masses of the compounds. All right. So remember, greater the value of Kf or Kb, greater is the magnitude of delta Tb and delta Tf, and greater the magnitude of delta Tb or delta Tf, better is the accuracy in calculating M2. Now, applications part, yes, that is basically antifreeze agents. What is added? Ethylene glycol added to the car radiators to lower the freezing point of water. That's a coolant what we add. Then Rast method, freezing point is the same as melting point. Instead of depression in freezing point, depression in melting point can be determined. For this purpose, camphor is used for solid solutes like naphthalene because it has high molar depression constant, that is 40 Kelvin per molality. The method is called as Rast method. So if you want to calculate with respect to what I can call the depression in melting point, then we use camphor over there, which will give maximum depression, so more accuracy. That's called the Rast method. Now, what it says, if Kf is the molecular depression constant per 100 grams of solvent. Now, if they say per 100 grams, then I will take Kf with respect, then I can take instead of 1000, I can take 100 also and I can calculate over there. So it depends how it is given. Normally it's always Kelvin kg per mole, but sometimes they can give it as per 100 grams of solvent also. Then you take it that way. Common salt, salt is sprinkled on ice, people, to depress or to lower the freezing point of water. NaCl, calcium chloride, is that to clear the snow on the roads because they depress the freezing point to such an extent that they cannot freeze to form ice. Hence, it melts off easily at the temperature. Addition of glycol to water is useful in summer to raise the boiling point of water and prevents what antifreeze adjuvants boil over. Molecular weight of polymers can be found. Then number average molecular weights can be found out over there. Weight average molecular weights. This is basically if we are knowing the number molecular weights. If N1 molecular weight has molecular weight M1 and N2 has molecular weight M2. So if I know the two compounds, by taking the summation, I can calculate their molar masses. These are just basically type uses, no numericals on this. Colligative properties like osmotic pressure gives the average number of molecular weight because they depend on the number of particles. That's the colligative properties part. Now, people, the last thing to talk, colligative properties where the solute particles will either associate or it will dissociate. Now, abnormal molar masses generally, that is the molar mass more than the expected. That abnormal molar mass is when either there will be association or dissociation. That is one part. Look at that, NaCl in water, then that's undergoing dissociation, or association like organic acids in benzene. Acetic acid in benzene will associate. We all know molar masses are inversely proportional to the colligative properties. So we have a factor given by the chemist called Van 't Hoff factor that is given by I, which is the observed particles upon the theoretical particles. So we can have it as delta P observed upon delta P theoretical, or delta TB observed upon delta TB theoretical, or delta TF observed upon delta TF theoretical, or pi observed upon pi theoretical. Or ye is the same thing if I talk with molar mass, it is reciprocal because molar mass and colligative properties are inversely proportional. So if Van 't Hoff factor I is observed particles upon theoretical particles. With respect to molar mass, Van 't Hoff factor I will be theoretical mass upon observed molar mass. Okay, so the factor I, look at that. Experimental value upon calculated, inversely proportional to the colligative properties. So I is calculated upon observed. So look at the formulas now. Everywhere the Van 't Hoff factor I will come. So Van 't Hoff factor I is basically nothing but, we say for electrolytes which undergo dissociation, I factor will be more than 1 because observed particles are more than the theoretical particles. So if I factor is more than 1, molar mass will be less than expected. Is this clear? Because the molar mass will get divided with respect to how many are getting dissociated completely. Same way, if for Van 't Hoff factor of association, the I factor will be less than 1 because the observed particles are less than the theoretical particle. So if I factor is less than 1, molar mass is more than expected. Like dimerization, it becomes almost double. So that's why everywhere, look at that, relative lowering of vapor pressure is equal to Ix2, or osmotic pressure is equal to pi is equal to CRT or ICRT, or delta TB is IBKM, I into KB into M, or delta TF is I into KF into M. Now people, calculation for degree of dissociation, that is alpha. How much it is dissociated? The formula is this. Alpha is I minus 1 upon N minus 1, where I is the Van 't Hoff factor, which is observed particles upon theoretical particles, or theoretical molar mass upon observed molar mass. And N for dissociation is the number of particles formed after dissociation. Particles formed after dissociation. Okay. Similarly, Van 't Hoff factor of association, if you calculate, then the formula is this. Alpha is 1 minus I into N upon N minus 1. But again, I is the same Van 't Hoff factor, but what is N now? N is number of particles taking part in association. So if I say normally, okay, acetic acid will dimerize in benzene, then number of particles N will be 2 because it's going to form a dimer. So 2 will become 1 that way. All right. And be very clear for acetic acid in the MCQs, read carefully. If they say acetic acid in water, then it undergoes dissociation. Acetic acid in benzene, then it will undergo association. Okay. That's one part. Now it says comparison of osmotic pressure, freezing point, boiling point, etc. of solution. For comparing the colligative property, electrolyte will dissociate. So solution of electrolyte will have greater value of same molar concentration. For solution of different electrolytes of same molar concentration, greater the ions produced, greater is the value of colligative property. Solutions of different non-electrolytes, glucose, urea, etc. of the same molar mass will show the same value of colligative property. Which means, what are we trying to say? Solution of different electrolytes, urea, glucose, but of same molar concentration. Both are having concentration C1 is equal to C2 because both give only one particle. They will have the same value of colligative property. NaCl and barium chloride, in spite of same molar concentration, more the ions produced, greater is the colligative property because NaCl number of particles are 2, barium chloride particles are 3 over there. Remember, pi is equal to ICRT. Okay. So when I say pi is equal to ICRT, it's proportional to the Van 't Hoff factor as well as its concentration and temperature. So when we are talking to calculate number of particles for any time to calculate will be nothing but, one is the number of ions produced, into its concentration multiplied by alpha. When normally it says assuming complete dissociation, then alpha will be 1. So for NaCl, barium chloride, if I say both of 1 molar, so concentration is 1, number of ions NaCl2, barium chloride 3, and assuming complete dissociation, alpha is 1 over there. we get the number of particles. So more the number of particles, greater the magnitude of colligative property. That's one. Comparing solutions of same or different non-neutrons, greater is the molar concentration, greater is the value of colligative property. If percentage strengths are given, then first convert them into molar concentration. Percentage strength is what? X by 100 into 1000 upon molar mass of solute. Convert the molar concentration of ions of the solute. Solution with greater concentration of particles will have greater value of colligative property. Yeah, because more the particles, more the higher the property. Greater the elevation, higher is the boiling point. However, greater the depression, lower is the freezing point. Because two colligative properties are increasing, two are decreasing. Remember that, okay? So greater the elevation, higher the boiling point. Greater the depression, we will say lower is the actual freezing point of solution. Like ice and water, the freezing point depresses to as low as minus 25 degrees. All right. So what do we say? Okay, if the depression is greater, then the actual freezing point is of the solution is lower. For 100% dissociation, having degree of dissociation is 1, that is alpha is 1. Van't Hoff factor I is number of ions from one molecule of electrolyte. Now last point, Van't Hoff factor I greater than 1, then it undergoes dissociation, molar mass is less than expected. And if Van't Hoff factor I is less than 1, then we say it's for Van't Hoff factor of dissociation, where we say the molar mass will be more than expected. And if it is an ideal solution where there is no association and no dissociation, the Van't Hoff factor is exactly equal to 1 over there. Okay, that is one point. All right.